Welcome to everyone. We are doing Parshas Miketz with our friend for the year, Don Yitzchak Abravanel. So I want to begin with a overall observation that he makes, a fascinating one, which I've not seen in any other Mefarshim. Perhaps others also have a similar approach, but I have not seen it. And that is found in the writings of Abravanel on our parsha. It's a general overview. So I'm not going to cite a particular pasuk, but the storyline from last week's parsha and this week's parsha are both very well known. Of course, last week we are introduced in a meaningful way to Yosef. We have his role as his father's chosen, his father's most beloved son. Of course, his descent in the sense that his brothers hated him, sold him into slavery, and the events that are narrated in last week's parsha, which I'm going to review in a moment. In this week's parsha, Miketz, we find Yosef's rise from the dungeon to the palace. So Abravanel makes the following very interesting observation. He says, let's consider the wonders of the Creator, the wonders of the Almighty. Like the pasuk says in Ha'azinu, Ani amis ve'achaya. I will bring about death and I will bring about life. It's the manner of Hashem to control the world and to frequently mete out to a person experiences or a fate which perhaps is unpleasant, unhappy, maybe traumatic, and nevertheless, at the same time or at a different time in the life of the same person, experiences of exaltation, of revelation, of elevation, of redemption, of salvation. And he makes that exact point about these two Sedras. Parshas Vayeshev last week, as I said, when we're introduced to Yosef and his misadventures, and Parshas Miketz this week, where adventures continue, but Yosef is in a much more favorable place this week. And he enumerates 10 of them. And he says that the following. So Harishon, he says, in last week's parsha, we have 10 examples of his degradation. In this week's parsha, corresponding one by one, and we go through them now, he demonstrates how corresponding to the degradation in last week's Sedra, we have the exaltation in this week's Torah reading. He says the first one is in last week's parsha, Yosef sanui v'nit'av me'echav. He was hated, he was despised by his brothers. And here it says shahaya ahuv min hazarim paro v'chol mitzrayim, that he was hated by his brothers in last week's parsha, and in this week's Torah reading, we find he is beloved by total strangers, by Pharaoh, by the Egyptians, by the Egyptian courtiers, by the Egyptian aristocracy. Everybody loves him. So last week he was hated by his brothers, and this week he is beloved by strangers. The second one, he says, there shisna'u al inyanei hachalomos, that he was hated because of his dreams, and here he was beloved because he interpreted the dreams of Paro, a remarkable parallelism. The third one, he says, Sham ksiv vayavshitu es Yosef es kutanto es kesonos hapasim asher alav. In last week's parsha, it says that his brothers stripped him of that special garment of many colors that his father had given him. They stripped him of it. And here it says, Vaydalbesh oso bigdei sheish. Here it says that Paro clothed Yosef in bigdei sheish. Sheish is linen garments, and he placed upon his neck a golden a pendant on Savarov. So in last week's parsha, he was stripped of his clothing. In this week's parsha, he is given elegant royal clothing. The fourth one is that last week we read V'ashlichu labar. They threw him into the pit naked because they took off his garment. They threw him naked into the pit. V'yishlach Paro v'yiritzuhu min habar. In our parsha, he is elevated from the pit. V'galach, He shaves. V'yachalev simlo sav, and he changes his clothing from whatever jailbird clothing he was wearing, because it's not right, it's not within the dignity of the king to walk into his chamber dressed as a prisoner. So he changed his clothing. So in last week's parsha, he was thrown into the pit without clothing at all. In this week's parsha, he is elevated from the dungeon and he's given clothing to wear. The fifth, there it says Yosef Nimkar, Yosef was sold. And in our parsha, Yosef is doing the selling. He has grain, which everybody requires. So that, again, is a remarkable parallel, two sides of the same coin. Everybody is coming to Mitzrayim, to Egypt, to buy from Yosef. The sixth example, there in last week's Sedra, it says, Shalach Yosef el Achav. Yosef approached his brothers, and before he got close to them, they conspired to kill him, as we know in last week's parsha. And here it says the brothers went to Yosef, and before they got close to Yosef, he recognized them, and he conspired within himself to withhold his identity from them. So again, in last week's parsha, as he approached them, they saw him from afar, and they had a plan. Here, they approach him from afar, and Yosef has a plan. The seventh example, there it says, Shenis pared me echav, that he was separated from his brothers. And here it says, Shenis chabru echav imo, that his brothers came and gathered around him. So in last week's parsha, they expelled him, they alienated him, or he was alienated from them. And in our parsha, they come to Yosef, without knowing who he was, they seek his company. This eighth example, the eighth instance, Sham ksiva Yosef hurad Mitzrayima b'yirida uveshiflus. Yosef was brought down to Egypt. It's not down only in the sense that the land of Israel is higher and the land of Egypt is lower. I'm not certain whether it's true in every case from a what's the correct term, from the actual height below sea level, above sea level. But of course, in our perception or in our characterization of the land of Israel, that is always aliyah. And when one goes from the land of Israel to Mitzrayim, he's going down. But it's not only that. Of course, he was brought down as a slave. He was purchased for the merchants paid 20 silver coins for him. So it says, "V'Yosef hurad Mitzrayim v'kan," and here it says, "V'nason oso al kol eretz Mitzrayim." He was placed above all of Egypt. So when he went down to Egypt, he was like despised, and he was human merchandise. And in our parsha, he's placed above all of Egypt. The ninth instance, Sham ksiv shisha'alaso eshes Adonam shachva imi. In last week's parsha, so his mistress, the wife of Potiphar, was propositioning him, was seeking to seduce him, almost threatening him, seeking to intimidate him. Shachva imi. It's not politically correct in today's climate, but because as she contended, Yosef was the aggressor. But as the Torah describes, in this instance, Yosef himself was the victim. But I don't want to get political. I'm just saying that was the scenario in last week's parsha. Shachva imi v'lo ratza, and Yosef demurred. Yosef rebuffed her advances. And here we find that Yosef marries Asnat Bas Potifera, the daughter of this woman, possibly adopted daughter of this woman. So again, last week she sought to entice him or to entangle him, and he rebuffed her advances. And in this week's parsha, he marries a noble woman through his own choice. I mean, Paro was the shadchan, but here we find that Yosef, so to speak, is the full participant in this union whereas last week's Parasha, Yosef refused the indecent advances of the wife of Potiphar. And the 10th example, the 10th instance, Sham Ksiv Shelo Zachar Sar Hamashkim as Yosef Ishkachev. In last week's Parasha, it says that the butler, the chief butler, did not remember Yosef, he forgot all about him. And Khan, and in our Sedra, Shezacharo, he remembered him, Ushivacho, and he praised him to Paro. So again, we've got the other side of the coin. In last week, he forgot, and in this week, he remembered. And of course, that was part of the process by which Joseph ascended to the palace. So he says, with these 10 things, these 10 instances, we find exactly the other side of the coin, the parallel or the corresponding experience. And I would like to say, and he concludes, from here we see Shemipi Elyon Teitzeh Haraos Vahatov, that from the mouth of heaven, so to speak, from Hashem, uh, the experiences of man for good and for better issue. Sheharahahu shekara Yosef, that those misfortunes which befell Yosef, which we read all about in last week's Sedra, Hayahachana was preparatory of emtzai, and the medium by which all of his greatness and all of his achievements and all of his prestige was the result. I think we can understand how in the life of Yosef and in so many other cases, dare I say, even in our own lives, the achievements are only accomplished through the agency, through the precedent of misfortune, of downfall, of frustration, of as I said, like we have in the case of Yosef. And here we have a remarkable instance, remarkable example. I mean, we're all aware in a general way that last week's Sedra, Yosef was suffering, and this week's Sedra, Yosef is riding high. But to see the analysis of Abravanel in which he finds 10 exact instances of the two parallel, the two mirror experiences is fascinating to see. And in a way, this is a kind of, although he does not say it, but it's a kind of echo or consistent with the Hanukkah story as well, where the Jewish nation was persecuted and suppressed by the Hellenic culture and by the force of rule of law of the Assyrian Greeks. And as a result of the Hanukkah events, or the events that we remember and we celebrate on Hanukkah, there was a transformation, and the Jewish people were able to sort of reverse their circumstances. I don't want to follow that too far, because actually the victory in a way was partial and short-lived, but nevertheless, as we well know, we do celebrate those events. Just want to mention briefly, because it's nice to be able to tie it into Hanukkah. Of course, we're celebrating Hanukkah right now. Obviously, whoever is listening to this now is well aware, but some may listen on the video recording at some future time. So yeah, it's Hanukkah. So I want to share a thought, not from Abravanel, a nice thought about a possible connection between the Parsha and Hanukkah. So at the beginning of the Sedra, as we know, Paro dreams, and he dreams of cows that come up from the Nile River. They are robust, they are well fed, and then seven other cows who are emaciated. He's almost shocked to see such scrawny, emaciated cows. He never saw anything as pathetic in all of his time in Egypt. And then, in a description that can only be in a dream, the scrawny cows consumed the robust cows, and Paro awoke with a fright. V'tipaim rucho, he's greatly shocked by it, greatly troubled by this dream. Obviously, that is very well known. So one could look at it in the following way: Paro places great stock in his strength, in his power, whether the power of his army or the power of his economy, or maybe his personal strength as well. Perhaps he had a personal trainer. He trained every day, and he was a very sturdy, athletic person. It's very possible that he was. In any case, Paro is all about personal strength. When he sees that the cows, which are scrawny and emaciated, consume those that are powerful, those that are strong and robust and well fed, so Paro was very disquieted by such a possibility because he saw in it possibly a kind of symbolism of his own frailty and that he could be overcome by those who are weaker. And of course, that is exactly the echo of Hanukkah when we say, Giborim biyad chalashim. The powerful, the strong were delivered into the hands of the weak. The Greek armies who were so powerful succumbed to the weaker Jewish forces through divine intervention. Like the pasuk says, uh, "Al Yishalel Hagibor B'Gvuraso," that this one who is strong should not glory in his strength. Of course, it's human nature to do exactly that, and maybe this was why Paro was so distressed by that vision that he saw. Okay, it's just a nice drash, a kind of anticipating the Purim story of Giborim B'Yad Chalashim. Now, for those who took note, I'm not sure if anyone did, of the title that we've given to our little short shir tonight, Abravanel's Dreambook. So, of course, we had already in last Parsha the dreams of Yosef. Before that, we had the dreams of Yaakov. Before that, we had the dream of Yaakov going back to Parshas Vayetze. But at the end of last week's Sedra, the dreams of the butler and the baker, and even more so, the dreams of Paro that we just alluded to now, is very prominent in the Torah narrative. And Yosef is the one who has the dreams. Yosef is also the one who interprets other people's dreams. And this occasions an extended essay in the commentary of Abravanel, our friend for the year. It extends for more than 12 pages, in which he takes a look at dreams generally. He also relates to the dreams, particularly as we're just saying in our parsha, especially the dreams of Paro and the dreams that Yosef interpreted of the butler and the baker in last week's parsha. But he also considers dreams generally, and I call this Abravanel's dream book. He devotes, as I say, a lot of space to it, and he looks at it from a philosophical standpoint, of course, from a Torah standpoint as well. He quotes along the way Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, who was one of the most influential Arabic philosophers in the age when Arabic thought and philosophy and science was at the forefront of human advances, drawing on the Greek, by the way, and greatly extending it and refining it. And Lahavdil Christian, or I should say Christian and Lahavdil Jewish scholars, Rambam and many, many others, Abravanel among them, drew on that literature. It seems that Abravanel was also proficient in Arabic because I did some research, and although Al-Ghazali's works were translated in part into Hebrew, we don't find that they're translated in full, and therefore it makes me think that Bravanel may have read it in the original. This Al-Ghazali lived in Persia. He died in 1111. It's easy to remember, 1111. And his writings, as I say, were very influential. He was a Sunni Muslim, and his writings were greatly influential. I don't think that he dabbled in any of the kind of Muslim preoccupations that have caused so much grief to the world in recent times. But I'm just mentioning his name because Abravanel looks at the subject of dreams, drawing on the philosophical and the speculative, and even you might say the medical literature that was available to him. He also quotes Aristotle a lot, and I would say Lahavdi quotes the Rambam quite a lot as well. I'm talking about in this particular essay, this extended essay, the Rambam in Mor Nevuchim. In a few places, he quotes him, and he does mention the page and rather the book and the chapter of the writings of the Rambam as well. So, with that intro, let me just tell you, in the time we have, about the way Abravanel approaches dreams. So, in accordance with his style, he starts with a number of questions. But whereas usually his questions take up, let's say, a short paragraph, or maybe even only a couple of sentences in the questions, but here each question takes up excuse me, half a page or more, sometimes more than that in its own right, because the questions are not just why does it say this or what's the meaning of that, but rather more fundamental questions. Yes, what are dreams? Why does a person dream? What is the significance of dreams? Do dreams have any significance at all? Of course, it's evident that there can be prophetic dreams. There can be dreams which can be interpreted, and he quotes very extensively. I mentioned these philosophical sources, but his main source is the Gemara in Brachos in the Perek HaRoeh, where the the Mishnah says that someone who sees a rainbow, he makes a certain bracha. And on that sort of note, the Gemara in Brachos launches into an extended, fascinating analysis or discussion of dreams. I saw once someone observed that it's the longest single Agadata passage in all the Talmud, extending for several pages. And Abarbanel quotes from that passage in the Gemara in a few different places, and he asked that we seem to have contradictory statements about whether dreams are meaningful, dreams are just a neurological phenomenon, whether dreams are something that a person can control or influence, whether the dreams influence him, whether the dreams are prophetic, and whether dreams are influenced by the interpretation of the dream. So there are many fascinating questions, and he deals with them one by one. I'm not going to go through them at length. I'm not going to summarize 12 pages in the minutes that we have left, but I will tell you how he divides dreams into three categories. Abravanel says there's a type of dream which he calls dimioni. Dimion is imagination. And he mentions that even Baalei Chaim, even animals dream. And I was skeptical about that, but I did a bit of research, as one can do with the greatest of ease nowadays, and it seems that the scientific evidence is that animals do dream. I mean, obviously, the cognition of a bovine or a fox or an opossum is not the same cognitive capacity of a person, obviously. But to the extent that animals think, and I'm sure they do think in some way, they think at night as well in dreams. So it would seem. The scientific evidence suggests. But obviously, when an animal has a dream, it doesn't have any significance. It doesn't have any portent. It doesn't have any influence on the future events or the experiences of the animal. And Abravanel compares many dreams, probably most human dreams, are like that as well. He says effectively what a person thinks about during the day, he may dream about at night, or what a person aspires to, he may dream about. A person may also dream about many fantastic and impossible things. And he goes through all of those various possibilities. He quotes many psukim, all of which dismiss the significance of dreams. From Yeshaya, from Yirmiyah, we find that the prophets of Israel, the great prophets of Israel, will often uh, criticize or reject or denounce the dreams that false prophets have, where they say that, I beheld in a dream this and this event, and the prophets will denounce that and say this is completely without basis and without validity. So he says that's one type of dream is dimioni, and he says that those are just the result of human condition, and he says maybe according to a person's health, or according to what a person eats, or according to the wine that he may drink. These can all affect his dreaming patterns, what he dreams about, how vivid his dreams are. He doesn't say explicitly, but perhaps he's alluding even to his hallucinogenic drugs or potions that a person might consume. And when he does, and he dreams fantastic things, it does not have spiritual significance and does not portend the future. However, there's another type of dream. And the other type of dream, he says, is tzodkim, dreams which are truthful. Now, it doesn't mean that what a person dreams will come true in the full sense. The Rambam, he quotes the Rambam, who says that even a dream which is a prophetic dream, or even a dream which represents that Hashem is, so to speak, communicating something to him through the medium of the dream, some parts of the dream are accurate, and some parts of the dream are just distraction. And we have a statement that which he quotes a couple of times that just as you cannot have grain without chaff, without the husk, without the straw, so in a similar way, you cannot have a dream without, again, detritus, a dream without irrelevant features. And the Rambam says that even as I said, a dream though Hashem is telling you something, it's just the general thought of the dream, the general tenor of the dream, the general impact of the dream. Is it favorable? Is it unfavorable? Is it reassuring? Is it terrifying? That sort of thing. But the details of the dream, says the Rambam, even a prophetic dream, are not necessarily meaningful, and one doesn't and it can be futile to try to identify the significance of every detail of a dream. So these are the dreams that are tzodkim. And he says it gramim shamaymiim, like caused by heavenly influence. But those dreams are not the same as prophecy. On the contrary, it's a dream which has a germ of prophecy, a grain of prophecy, like we say, a grain of truth. And he quotes what it says in the Talmud, he quotes this also more than once in the 12 pages, that a dream is 1/60th of prophecy. Maybe he quotes it in the question and then again in the answer. I just remember reading it more than once. A dream is 1/60th of prophecy. That's a way of saying that there can be, now in the first category, it's nothing of prophecy. In the second category, and distinguishing one from the other may be tricky, but in the second category, there can be an element of prophetic, like intuition, or something which is a prophetic premonition of events to come. And he gives examples of that, like when Shaul HaMelech, complained that God has not revealed his intention to me. He's not revealed to me my destiny, not through any prophet, not through any other means, not through a dream as well. So what Shaul was saying was, it would be helpful if when I sleep at night, Hashem enables me to see a dream that will give me some kind of indication, some kind of reassurance. That's why he went to the necromancer, the witch of Ein Dor, and he got himself into trouble as a result. But Abravanel says that when Shaul was expressing the frustration or the disappointment that Hashem did not give him any indication in a dream, it was this kind of dream. Or another very interesting example, not one of the most famous dreams, but I wonder which of the scholars or the Chachamim or Chachamot, maybe tonight, will remember Gidon. Gidon was one of the early generations of the great men of Israel. How great okay, he was great. Difficult to say. Won't compare one to the other. Yiftach was definitely not so great. Gidon was, I'm sure, greater than Yiftach. But okay, he was a warrior. He was a righteous person, and as you know, remains a popular biblical male name to this day. Why am I saying that? Because he was told by Hashem to rescue the Jewish people, to redeem them, to save them from Amalek and other nations who were gathering against them. And Gidon was greatly outnumbered by the enemy army. And it seems that he was insecure. So Hashem told him, if you're looking for some reassurance, go down to the enemy encampment and listen to what they're talking about. So in the stillness of night, he went with a companion, and he went and he listened closely, and he heard one man telling a dream that he beheld to another man. And he dreamt of the dream. If you're here in front of me, I would say, who can tell me? Well, I'll do it on the Zoom, about a rolling barley bread. In dreams you can imagine all kinds of fantastic and irrational things. Chazal say that this happened on the second day of Pesach, when we bring the Omer, which is from the Surin, from the barley. So he beheld this Amaleki, or whoever he was, Midianite, I think. He beheld in the dream a barley bread that was rolling and flattening their tents and wreaking havoc. So he told his friend about it. So his friend said, that is an indication that Gidon is going to come with his forces and drive us all away. So when Gidon heard that, listening closely, he was reassured. So what kind of a dream was that? I mean, meaning, was that a prophetic dream? Well, in a way, it was. It was a dream in which the other Midianite just maybe instinctively, intuitively gave that interpretation, and it was all for the purpose of giving reassurance to Gidon. So it says Abravanel, that's the second type of prophetic dream. And then there is the genuinely prophetic dream, which is not just a dream, but it is a prophetic dream. It's a form of prophecy. Now, probably Paro did not have that third type. That is the type of dream that Yaakov had when he beheld the ladder. Or we have in the Parsha 2 weeks ago in Vayetze, besides the ladder, we find that, excuse me, that Hashem came to him, to Yaakov, or rather, he beheld in a dream about the sheep and all of that, the different types of sheep, different categories, and Abraham also b'chazon and nevuah. So those experiences are definitely a type of prophecy where the prophet will experience the dream. Hashem appears to him in a dream. Says Abravanel, an interesting thing though. It's not only great people, it's also not great people, where Hashem will appear to him in a dream for the purpose of the benefit of the righteous, such as Paro when he abducted Sarah, Avimelech when he abducted Sarah, and I think Rivka as well. I think Hashem appeared to Avimelech then as well. Yeah, I think so. But definitely appeared to him once, maybe twice. It was different than Avimelech, by the way. Or a Lavan, Hashem appeared to Lavan as well. Abravanel doesn't mention it, but Hashem even okay, it probably wasn't a dream. I was going to say he spoke to the whale that swallowed Jonah, but that was a different kind of thing. But it's similar in the sense that when Hashem has a purpose, so to speak, and it can become a means by which Hashem carries out His will by even appearing in a dream to these people who are not inherently worthy, but that is prophetic dream. So those are the three types of dreams, and he discusses how to tell the difference between one and the other, especially the first two, that which is dimyoni, imagination only, and that which is chalomot tzodkim, where there's a like a grain of truth to it. And then he speaks about interpreting the dreams and that sort of thing, but we don't have time for all of that. Our time is really up, but I do want to end with a story about a dream, but a dream of a particular type. You may have heard the story from me before. I'll tell it briefly. One of the great stories of the Panovizha Rav. Rav Yosef Kahaneman was known as the Panovizha Rav. He learned in Telz, fascinating personality. We don't have time for his biography in any detail right now. He made his way during the Holocaust years, because he went really before the Holocaust began, when it's still possible to get to the land of Israel. It was then Palestine, and then World War II broke out. The circumstance in Palestine became extremely dire, extremely anxious. In addition to the famine and the hostility and the poverty, when I say famine, the scarcity of food and the poverty, but they were expecting the forces of Ramel, the desert fox, to overrun the land of Israel within a couple of weeks. And it was at that time that he arranged to purchase a piece of land outside of Tel Aviv, and a kind of sand dune that was on the edge of the small village of Bnei Brak. And he gathered around a few of his followers and disciples, and he said, "Today the Panovich Yeshiva is born." That is to say, the sort of sequel to it, its second edition here in the land of Israel. And he described where the Beis Medrash will be, and where the dormitory will be, where the Chadar Ochel will be. And one of his supporters or Talmidim said, "Rebbe, du cholomt, you're dreaming. This is your vision of accomplishing all of this is completely that of a dreamer." His name was Yosef, or Yosef Kahneman. So he responded, "Nachon, ani cholem, aval ani lo yoshen. Ich schlaf nicht. I'm dreaming, but I'm not sleeping." Meaning, yes, it is a dream, but it's a dream that can be realized, that can be fulfilled. So that is the sense in which that kind of dream is not any of Abravanel's three categories. He's talking about a dream when a person is asleep. But the Panavish Rav said, I'm dreaming when I'm awake and I'm going to achieve it. And so he did. Panavish remains, as probably you know, has become and remains one of the great yeshivas of our times and continues to flourish in Bnei Brak. And I've been there many times to visit and often think of that time in the early 1940s, 1942 or 43, when the Panovizha Rav stood on that sand dune in Bnei Brak and he dreamt of the Panovizh Yeshiva. Thank you to everyone, and I wish you a Freilich and Chanukah. As I said at the very beginning, we will not be the shir will be in recess for the next 2 weeks, times of vacation. Of course, Torah is no vacation from Torah. I hope to continue my Abravanel studies, of course, day by day, but we won't have the shir for the next 2 weeks. Amir Hashem, we will resume in the new season, and we look forward to seeing you then. Shabbat Shalom, L'kulam.